Okay, hello people in YouTube land and those that are part of the Cringe Crew Gaming community Discord and those that follow us on Twitch. I am Traductus.
And I'm Ted.
And this is the Cringe Crew Gaming James Bond podcast. We are on episode 5 with the 5th Bond movie and the end of the first Connery era, the movie You Only Live Twice. Released in 1967, this is the first James Bond film to not occur a year after the last one. This one actually took 2 years to be released. This one, we have a new director here with Lewis Gilbert. He basically was hired because he was available. And he originally declined to do this, and then quote from Wikipedia, Cubby Broccoli said, "Well, you can't give up this job. It's the largest audience in the world." And Lewis Gilbert agreed and directed the movie.
Fair enough.
And went on to direct 2 more, not concurrently. The next 2 films were not done by Lewis Gilbert. Lewis Gilbert would direct the 3rd Roger Moore Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, and the 4th Roger Moore Bond film, Moonraker, which I can't... Yeah, we'll get to the math later on that. But anyway, You Only Live Twice. They decided to do this one as opposed to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because in the book for the Blofeld trilogy goes Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then You Only Live Twice. But they decided to go with You Only Live Twice because, according to this, because OHMSS would require searching for high and snowy locations. So laziness. Fucking laziness.
Respectable.
But luckily the next one is OHMSS. And but
before you get too far, Solomon, did like you said that you read this book. Did the storyline get affected at all by the fact that they changed the order of the movies? Like how does this story from the books adapt to the story from the movies?
There's quite a few differences. And we'll actually go through this with who actually did the writing. It is since Richard Maybaum was unavailable, a close friend of Ian Fleming's, author Roald Dahl, who people know for writing The Witches, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which became Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the movie adaptation, and I believe James and the Giant Peach.
I believe so. That sounds right.
And
we're gonna pretend it's right.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. They had him since he was a friend, but he had no prior experience writing a screenplay, except for an uncompleted screenplay by the name of The Bells of Hell Go Ting-a-ling-a-ling. And Dahl said of the original novel, this was Fleming's worst book with no plot in it which would ever make a movie, and compared it to a travelogue. I call bullshit on that. And spoiler alert, all the shortcomings of this film, I blame on Roald Dahl, because Roald Dahl actually commented on Lewis Gilbert and said that he not only helped in in-script conferences, but had some good ideas, then left you alone. And when you produce the finished thing, he shot it. Other directors have such an ego that
your camera dipped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got it back. Okay. This is scuffed, but hey, it goes along with this movie. Kinda. All right. But anyway, basically it says, like, he shot it. Other directors would actually change the script. So therefore Gilbert, followed instructions and probably shouldn't have.
So Dahl blamed Gilbert for not being able to direct, but Dahl couldn't write the screenplay.
No. Dahl didn't complain about Gilbert. He thought he was great because he directed right from the screenplay.
Okay.
Didn't change it.
Okay. So he's saying other directors would have been better and adapted. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would have adapted it and would have pissed Dahl off because Dahl is a fucking tosser.
You hit your space bar again there, bud.
No, I didn't. I didn't hit my space bar.
Your camera's just all sorts of scuffed.
Scuffed, yeah. All right. But anyway, this was supposed to be the last movie with Sean Connery. He was tired of being typecasted. I mean, he found it difficult getting more work. He was uncomfortable with the fame that he got with James Bond, and he was afraid of being typecasted. They actually had to convince him to do this movie because he didn't really want to do it. And it's kind of obvious. Other people in the cast, since we're just going with cast for now. Let's see.
Scuffed again.
I mean, yeah. Oh well, we're not gonna bother with it because obviously some things weren't really bothered with that movie. All right, with the cast, we have Tetsuro Tamba as Tiger Tatanka, which is the head of the Japanese Secret Service in that movie. He is basically known for this movie, also Three Outlaw Samurai, Castle of Sand, G-Men 75, Battle of Port Arthur. Pretty decent filmography. For one of Bond's compacts, Deco Henderson, is played by Charles Gray, which people will know him as the villain in Diamonds Are Forever, but also his role in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I honestly forget right offhand who he played. Judge Oliver Wright. There we go. So yeah, he plays Judge Oliver Wright in Rocky Horror Picture Show. And
this man has no fucking neck. Where's his fucking neck?
And gosh, I lost my train of thought.
I'm so sorry. I hate that I know lines from that shit because I've never goddamn seen it. My mom is a huge Rocky Horror fan.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
I've heard that the movie was shit. That the crowd experience is a blast. And
the crowd experience. So you have to watch it with a crowd.
I know the crowd lines. I have never seen the fucking movie, and I know the crowd lines. It drives me insane to know that I've never seen the movie and I know the crowd. It's awful. All
right. And as for our Bond women, the role of Aki, who is the first Bond woman, is Akiko Wakabayashi. And she is known for being in a bunch of Godzilla films. So they actually got, some actresses that Western audiences would probably be familiar with. Mihama, who plays Kissy Suzuki. She is dubbed by Nikki Vanderzil because she had trouble learning English. She was actually going to have the role of Aki, with Akiko going to be Kissy Suzuki. But since Mihama had troubles learning English.
Camera's back.
Yep. They switched roles, especially since Mihama alluded that she might commit suicide if she was fired. And they're like, no, we don't want that. Now what's interesting is while filming this, while doing shot locations, because this is set in Tokyo, they actually Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, along with Lewis Gilbert, they actually canceled their flight back because they were able to see a ninja demonstration. The plane that they were supposed to go on crashed and killed everybody aboard. So potentially this movie might not have been made, nor all other Bond films after this.
Yeah, pretty remarkable.
Which is crazy. And what's really funny is that they actually ran into editor Peter Hunt there, who was on holiday. So he actually got to do some secondary directing, and I think that might have led to him actually getting the directing job for the next movie.
Pretty crazy train of action.
But the big one right here that I really like with the casting, we finally get to see Blofeld, and he is played by none other than Dr. Loomis, Donald fucking Pleasance. And he's easily the best part of this movie. Easily.
Well, yeah, not a high bar to hit, but yeah.
In my opinion, at least. But anyway, since we all got that, production, this took, 2 years to make. First, I kind of want to go with, I guess, positives. I think we'll start with you, Ted, because I think you have very few positives.
I have a very, very, very short list, as a matter of fact. I will say that whoever did set design for this movie was very Ken Adam was very thoughtful.
This is probably like one of his best set designs. In the entire series.
I thought sets in the past couple of movies were pretty good. This one he did a very good job at utilizing the whole set. Much of the end of the movie was centered around a base that was buried in a volcano, and like multiple scenes in the movie used the inside of the volcano, the outside of the volcano, the crest of the volcano in towards the volcano. Like his utilization of the whole set was fantastic.
And it was a massive fucking set too.
The set was brilliant. As we were watching the movie, Stallman was unfamiliar at the time of whether or not like they paid for the whole thing or whether it was some sort of CGI or camera angles CGI, utilizing a set. Sure, whatever the case may have been, whether it camera trickery or they genuinely built a base in a fucking crater somewhere. Like the design of the set and the way that they utilized the entire set was absolutely fantastic. And your camera's gone again. There we go. All right. I was just about to move on.
I'm just going to keep on hitting spacebar when it happens. We're just going to ignore it. We're going to ignore it like they ignored the fact that they used the same shot once.
No, that's on my list. I have an extensive list. That's not for likes though. I also very much loved Tanaka. I thought the way that they built his character in to complement Bond as a one-off, or what I assume to be a one-off character, at least to this point.
I believe he is a one-off. They
designed him to be witty and clever and intelligent and like very much part of the spy aesthetic. He was for having maybe 25 speaking lines, like full thought out lines, other than
he's dubbed
yes or
too.
No, sir. The way that his character was written into this movie, I thought was instantly fantastic. I took the note, I love Tanaka, from his second line of dialogue.
I love you.
Right. It was so
which is the code word, but
it was so brilliant. Like they wrote him in to this script phenomenally. I absolutely loved his character. He is my favorite like side character from this entire series so far. He was fantastic. I don't know that I have anything positive to say beyond that, to be completely honest.
Oh wow. I guess we'll go with my case. The set design I thought was really, really great. Now, essentially, Roald Dahl kind of like took the plot from Dr. No and did some tweaks. Some of the tweaks are pretty good. I like the fact that the villain's plot is more fleshed out. Also, Blofeld is a lot more menacing than Dr. No, thanks to the fact that Donald Pleasance doesn't fucking blink 1 second, and with that scar and everything, he just stares into your soul. He's just like, you can watch it on TV.
Oh, that like, you mentioned it before then that he never blinks. And I was like, that's not that creepy so far. He's only spoken 3 lines, but then he says, you can watch it on TV. And it felt like they were speaking to everyone in the 60s who was fascinated by television, and then he didn't blink, and I was terrified. That got me so bad.
Like, oh! And you know what's funny is that, so, like, a lot of the critics, because this wasn't critically panned, it was, like, mixed, but this is the first Bond film to not make as much money as the predecessor. So, which kind of sort of set a little bit of a panic, but it was still, do I know what?
Do you mean by profit, or do you mean by...
Profit.
Okay.
Profit. It didn't make as much profit-wise as... But it was still a high-grossing film. Like, the budget was $9.5 million, and it made $111.6 million.
Okay.
So, it just didn't... I guess that just...
Camera again.
Yeah, I guess that's just to say how, like, big of a success Thunderball was, or, like, they're just like, oh shit, maybe, like, Bond has lost its, grandeur.
Well, I will say, too, that like, I mentioned the cinematography in the last one was very good. The advancement of film as a medium felt like it advanced from the last one to this one. Cinematography was notably not nearly as good, but the quality of the film itself, like of movie making, was...
Scene with, like, this sumo wrestling, like, that was really clear.
The details of all of the faces in the crowd, like the width of camera angles and the clarity of shots was good. But that was more about that felt more like an advancement in filmmaking than it did for these films specifically.
Yeah, I also really like the fact that the Bond women, they're not like damsels in distress or just used specifically as eye candy. They actually, hold their own as, spy agents, because that's what they are.
Yeah, and they played a part.
And they're not undercut. I also like the part that what they kind of try to do with Aki, and she's not in the book. The entire book is just Kissy Suzuki, and no, Kissy Suzuki does not die.
Spoilers.
And spoilers in the book. She doesn't die in this movie either. Aki unfortunately dies.
Spacebar.
I do like that they try to it's not working.
That's all right.
Oh well.
If it dies, it dies. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Anyway, I do like that they try to, like, make you actually feel something, like with Aki, because she actually has kind of a character arc a little bit. Like, her and Bond kind of have, like, a thing going on, and then when she dies, and it's horrific because she gets poisoned, and, like, the sounds that she makes is, like, really freaking, like,
thorough.
Yeah.
Thorough.
And this goes down to my dislikes. For every good thing this movie does, it gets fucking undercut. And spoiler alert for my rankings. As much as they improve on Dr. No, they made a worse movie than Dr. No. Like, I like this movie, but there's just some things that are just glaringly, like, with it. And it just comes down to, like, maybe screenwriting, maybe it also has to do with, like, a lot of the special effects are very dated. Which part of me wonders if, like, a lot of the models, which are obviously models, is just like a throwback. Hey, we got a couple people from the Godzilla films, so why don't we, have, like, a shout out to the Godzilla films by having, like, obvious miniatures. But to me, it's just like, here's the thing. Like, yes, the first couple Godzilla films were serious, but then they kind of, like, played on, like, oh yeah, we don't really have a budget, so they kind of played on that. This takes itself way too serious at parts, and other parts it doesn't, so the tone just jumps around.
I agree.
Way too much. And a lot of the cases, it's like, if they didn't have the technology, why the hell did they, like, shoot it? Like, why have, like, the capsule thing, like, capture rockets when I mean, maybe it's because we're spoiled because like we've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey. We also seen like improvements in the technology since then, but that hasn't really dated. And even then, like, why recycle the plot from Doctor No when I'm actually going to read you the fucking plot from um Wikipedia here and tell me if Raul Duel's full of shit. All right. Now, I'm not gonna. Now, there is some spoilers from OHMSS. I'm not gonna read that, okay? All
Sure.
right? Okay. After the events of OHMSS, Bond lets his life slide, drinking, gambling heavily, and makes mistakes turning up late for work. His superior in the Secret Service, M, has been planning to dismiss Bond, but decides to give him a last chance opportunity to redeem himself by assigning him to a diplomatic branch of the organization. Bond is subsequently renumbered 7777 and is handed an impossible mission, convincing head of Japan's secret intelligence, Tiger Tatanka, to provide Britain with information from radio transmissions captured from the Soviet Union, codenamed Magic 44. In exchange, the Secret Service will allow the Japanese access to one of their own information sources. Bond is introduced to Tanaka and to the Japanese lifestyle by an Australian intelligence officer, Deco Henderson. When Bond raises the purpose of his mission with Tatanka, it transpires that the Japanese have already penetrated the British information source and Bond has nothing left to bargain with. Instead, Tatanka asks Bond to kill Dr. Guntram Shatterhand, who operates an embarrassing garden of death in a rebuilt ancient castle on the island of Kyushu, where people flock there to pay to commit suicide. After examining photos of Shatterhand and his wife, Bond discovers that Shatterhand and his wife are Ernst Stavro Blofeld and Irma Bunt. Bond gladly takes the mission, keeping his knowledge of Blofeld's identity a secret so he can kill Blofeld. Okay. Made up and trained by Tatanka and aided by former Japanese film star Kissy Suzuki, Bond attempts to live as a mute Japanese coal miner in order to penetrate Shatterhand's castle. Basically, he infiltrates the Garden of Death, kills Blofeld, and ends up getting amnesia by getting hit on the head after suffering an injury through like his battle with Blofeld, because he challenges to a duel and strangles him to death. Spoiler alert: Blofeld doesn't die in this movie. And he ends up with Kissy at the end of the book. Amnesiac, thinking that he's her husband, and they have a kid together. And then he remembers something about like Russia and like transmissions from there. And then figures he'll go there to figure out who he is. You're telling me that Roald Dahl couldn't fucking come up with a plot with that? By the way, the Garden of Death is like a garden filled with like numerous poisonous plants.
I honestly, I almost didn't recognize the movie or the story you were describing, just based on the what you just read.
Yeah. Doesn't that sound like that would have been a better plot line than what we got? Like, granted, like I like High Chief, the battle with High Chief Peter Maivia. I love the volcano lair and everything, but like it just falls so short on a lot of things.
I guess like to hear words from Wikipedia doesn't paint that picture for me. Of being like, I really truly I didn't have any complaints about the plot that we did get.
True.
I guess having read the novel, like that could have painted a more vivid picture than what the movie.
I haven't read the novel in a long time. That's why I had to go back. But like to me, it's just like
what
to me. I think a lot of like nits this a lot is the blatant freaking sexism, which is really bad in this movie.
That's not okay. As terrible as it was, it's not even highest on my list of complaints.
Oh wow.
There. We're getting there.
And also the special effects, which a lot of the cases are duds. And it's like, to me, like the Garden of Death could have made more practical thing for them to do, and it probably would have aged well better than what we got, especially with like
fair.
the volcano lava, and like the rear projection in this is really bad for whatever reason, and I think it's just because they overused it.
I'll agree
also with,
that
like,
it was poor, but it was not as egregious as it was in other films.
Yeah. When we
like
go
other
with
films used it in shorter segments, right? That like, hey, this is really fucking disgusting, but it only lasts 8 seconds. This was used pretty consistently. It was less bad, but more frequent that made it worse.
Right. With that being the case, if we want to, you can go over the sexism because I have stuff to comment on it.
Okay.
So if you want to go over your dislikes, if you want to start with the sexism, and I can finish my part.
Yeah.
But I think kind of unfortunate what it does.
We'll save my most egregious offense for later as far as dislikes go, but the sexism was brutal in this. I'll give them credit that race was a very intricate part of the plot line in the film.
Yeah, oddly enough, I thought like Charles Gray's character, when I remembered, I thought he was in Yellowface, but he wasn't. I'm like, oh, so this is actually a little bit better than I thought it was. But Connery's still disguised as a Japanese man.
So, as far as race goes, right? Like insensitivity as a blanket whole, rather than defining sexism versus racism. Using the Russians as an enemy, using the Japanese as a middleman for the plot line, I thought they did a pretty decent job at avoiding being overtly racist.
Right, except for probably like the beginning part. But
for the most part, there were still some parts that like I notably out loud said, "This is pretty racist." like there were moments. But for the most part, using race as a basis of the plot line, I thought they did a decent job at avoiding it based on what we've had from previous films.
Yeah, and it also helps that Sean Connery just sounds like Sean Connery. Least convinced, worst disguise ever, but like Konnichiwa.
I think we're 2 minutes into the movie before it might have been before opening title before I said, like, man, Connery gave up on pretending to be British and he's just a fucking Scotsman now, isn't he? But like, so racism, I will give an overall passing grade to as compared to the last few movies. The sexism, on the other hand, look, there were other parts of the previous 4 movies that were, but like one line at a time, violations of human rights kind of sexism, that were just egregiously bad as single lines that crossed so many boundaries. This movie didn't have many of those. One line is like an entire gender should be offended, but the compilation of all of the times that they just said, hey, women don't matter, with less like, or with suggestive wording, or like with the meaning of the plot or the characters in that moment, was absolutely disgusting. There were so many times I wanted to give up on this movie, not because it was a poor movie, but because the outward women don't matter mentality of the writing, the directing, the acting, all of it was so vile. I was so disgusted through all of this movie about how little they respected women.
It ruins certain parts of the movie, because like with Tatanka just going like, men come first in Japan, and it's like the women don't matter. It's like, okay, it ruins the scene where number 11 gets, killed by piranhas. Like, it's just like, oh wow, so that's just adding to the theme that women don't matter, as opposed to like, oh shit, as like a fake out what they probably were intended to, but it adds that context.
No,
that's also with
that's
Aki's
the best example though. No, the number 11 dying is the best example, because both Agent 1, Agent 11, they both failed to do the job. Rather than killing them both, rather than setting an example with number 1 for number 11, whatever the case may be, like, he only specifically killed 11 and gave 1 another shot, despite all of the racist things that were a part of Asian culture, quote unquote, that aren't, first of all, but like they couldn't even guise it under the
maybe
same.
Back then I'm no
even under the guise of the same plot hole, like the whole the Asian culture, quote unquote, women come second, men come first, that they explained in the movie. Like like, okay, put that to the side as they're talking about Spectre now. The fact that they're still saying the women have less of a chance than men was so vile. It was two separate whole entire entities of this movie, of the plot line, of the story arc, that women don't matter, like was so outwardly disgusting to me. I would like, that was the most egregious example. It was so vile.
Yeah, and with Aki's death, where you think, like, which should be like a oh no, like, like you felt like in your chest, like, no, like it can't be, her. It gets undercut because you're just like, oh, so it's just the theme that women don't matter, and then she gets replaced by like basically a similar character. It's like D&D, know.
That one was rough because it was any Asian woman who's mildly attractive can replace any other Asian woman who's mildly attractive.
And
like, it
I will say this: there are personality differences between the two characters of Aki and Kissy, but it's very minimal, and Kissy barely gets any time. So it's
right,
to me, it's like, why even have the two actresses there when you could just had it Kissy Suzuki the entire time?
Or to be honest, like, as far as story arc of the movie goes, when Aki dies, like, it could just be motivation. He doesn't have to fuck somebody else. It doesn't have to be another Asian woman who gets disrespected. Like, it could just be Bond. Like, that there's no, him having a radio in the final action scenes could have replaced the entire female character that replaced Aki after she died. Like, it's so ridiculous how hard they put effort into disrespecting women in this movie.
Yes. I already have it down on the curve.
As long as we're on dislikes, though, I'll keep going because I've got a couple before I get to
my list is done.
My most egregious one I'll save for the end. There was a lot of points in time where, like, I think I mentioned earlier that it felt like filmography had advanced from the last movie to this one. Like, the quality of films as an overall whole had improved, and there were a lot of points.
I also say the fight scenes also kind of improved a little bit at occasion.
Like I said, quality of films as a whole improved to this one. That like, action scenes that I had a problem with, I mean, most notably in even from Russia with Love, where I had complaints about those fight scenes. Like, it felt like even the poorly choreographed ones seemed better in this one because films had improved, not because this movie improved, but because films improved.
Right.
And so I'll give credit there, but like, even
they also had competition with the spoof Casino Royale 1967.
Even
which was panned.
Even with those advancements, there were still some points in time in action that it felt like, hey, we put enough other budget in the rest of this movie that we don't have to give a shit about this. Most notably the helicopter fight, which I'll get to again when I get to my most egregious point. It's part of a lump sum whole, because I promise it's a far bigger picture than how terrible that scene by itself was. The sexism we mentioned. The other point that was not super terrible, but was notable, was that a lot of this movie felt like it dragged a little.
That's the biggest thing about this, is that the first half just drags like hell, and once it gets to the volcano, you're like, oh wow, it's actually starting to be like, okay, here we go. It's like, this is going to be great, and then the rear projection at the end, and it's like,
I will say that, like, the past 4 movies have felt like they were missing exposition. I think I commented on it during the Dr. No podcast, right. But I think that, like, they have never done a very good job at establishing storyline. Goldfinger may have been the exception to that, where they definitely gave you a whole lot of story, but for the most part, Bond movies to this point have not done a very good job at establishing why they're doing the things that they're doing, what their motivation is, and why Bond becomes involved other than it's James Bond and he's supposed to. While this movie established that, the establishment of those points became super long. I don't know that it was super overdrawn. I don't know that it was necessarily extraneous, but it felt like it took forever. I feel like better writing, better story design could have made the exposition of 45 to 50 minutes take 20 to 25.
Yeah. Oh, especially like it was like the longest opening title sequence that we not opening title sequence, but like pre-title sequence that we've seen. Like a lot of that stuff could have been just done by exposition in like a couple lines. They didn't have to show all that.
Right. There was a lot of exposition that just became completely and totally unnecessary. And the part that I felt like I've missed from the last 4 movies has felt like they drew it out to 45 minutes when it could have been 20. And so the beginning of the movie felt extremely slow. While all of it was necessary, it was important, and it was valuable. I won't even say that it wasn't worth watching for those parts. I will say that it became far longer than it needed to be, which made the movie feel like it was twice as long as it was. As for my most egregious point, when you watch a film, any film of any genre, the entire purpose of the movie is your ability to suspend disbelief. Even if something is unrealistic, you should be able to buy into the concept that it could be real, or if that's not possible, like if it's some sci-fi movie, you can buy into how it's potential for it to be real. They establish it in a way that realism for the universe that the movie is set in could possibly exist.
And good example of that would be the volcano lair, the gadget that unlocks the safe, and then the alarm still goes off.
Well, okay, so totally breaking this movie out of context, right? Like, as far as suspending disbelief goes, for anyone who's ever read Ender's Game, right? Ender's Game was a sci-fi novel. It's since been transitioned into a movie, which was notably worse than the book. Please read the goddamn book. But the whole premise of that was that they're training for zero gravity battle, and like the premise was that it was set in the future in a place that they were fighting intergalactic battles, right? So while it may not be happening on Earth in 1980, whatever that book was written, 1990, whatever, like the idea, like they established the point at which it's in the future, they're fighting intergalactic battles, so zero gravity fights are realistic, right? They've established the fact that you can suspend the disbelief of we can't fight in zero gravity in 1985. That they've given you the reason to believe that it could potentially be real. This
and I was mentioning, like, you know, they do suspend your disbelief in this movie a couple of times, but then they just kill it.
They had no ability whatsoever for you to suspend disbelief. I mentioned the helicopter scene earlier, so I'll start with that one. But they put so much budget into 4 giant helicopters chase this fucking lawnmower with an overhead propeller. But rather than giving you any action scenes whatsoever regarding those, they blew up the same helicopter with CGI 4 fucking times. You saw the exact same helicopter. Helicopter model blow up 4 fucking times. It was impossible, even in the 60s, when that may have been the most advanced technology ever, for you to go, man, they blew up that helicopter. It was so cool. You 100% knew that it absolutely wasn't real. It was like the cutaways in fucking SpongeBob. It was so terrible. The other one you mentioned was the volcano scene,
which killed the climax.
I 100%. 100%. Like, there was no ability for you to buy into what was happening. You went, man, this is all too scripted and all too bad. You mentioned that Connery phoned it in, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I think you can avoid that point if you're not looking for it.
Right,
The writers phoned it in. It was like they thought, well, Connery's done, so we're all done, and they were never going to write another Bond film again. This was so
Roald Dahl never did another screenplay for the Bond film.
Terrible.
So
there was,
and this is a friend of Ian Fleming.
There was so much extraneous crap that happened because they thought it would be good for movie production, and you couldn't suspend disbelief around it. You couldn't invest it into the plot line. It was so stupid. When What's-Her-Face tries to kill Bond the first time, when Agent One tells 11 hires What's-Her-Face, or one hires 11.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's 11. One's actually Blofeld. I don't know what number the Japanese businessman is.
Okay. I thought the Japanese businessman was 1. There was Blofeld and then 1 and then 11. Regardless.
Blofeld's number 1.
Regardless. I thought he was Blofeld. I didn't think he was Agent 1. Regardless, doesn't matter. Yeah. Doesn't matter. The whole thing was like, okay, they have a really cool use of technology, right? They advance the plot beyond 1967 to show that they can X-ray him sitting at a desk. They show he's got a gun. They realize the fact that he's not who he says he is or why he's there, right? They do all of the exposition to prove the fact that they should be doing something about it, and then they let him leave. And then they say, kill him, 11. So 11 goes to kill him. She has him tied to a chair. For no reason, she just decides to fucking kiss the guy, has a scalpel to his neck, and says, absolutely not. This is ridiculous. Puts him in a private jet, straps him into the jet so he can't move, and then uses a parachute so that hopefully the jet will crash. Like there's so much extraneous crap. If she had any intention of killing him, she'd have just killed him. There is no ability in this movie to suspend disbelief, to believe for any singular moment that what is happening is real or realistic.
And with that, all they had to do to actually make that seem realistic is if it goes, kill him, make it look like an accident.
Well, make it look like an accident would have helped, but even then,
well, yeah, but I'm just trying to rationalize it a little bit.
Even then, had they said make it look like an accident, why do you need to make it look like an accident? The world already thinks he's dead. That's the basis of the plot line.
Right.
There's no ability through this entire film to believe that what is happening or why it's happening is at all possible or realistic. It's so terrible. You cannot get invested in this movie without going, this is crap. I mentioned on several occasions during the watching period that I was like, this feels like a spoof of a Bond movie. There's no way this is Bond. It's Mel Brooks should be starring in the spoof of this movie. It was so awful at making you buy into why or when anything was happening.
It is a downside, and I actually like this movie, but even then, I still see things that's just compared it to other Bond films, especially the one after this, which for those don't know, is actually my favorite one. But we'll see if the rankings change on that when I rewatch it. But just seeing how well put together Thunderball was, how put together From Russia with Love is. By Bond number 5, you figured they would have, and 2 years.
Yeah.
Thunderball took a year. From Russia with Love took a year.
Well,
2 years.
That might
2 years for this.
That might also be a part of it too, right? Is that you mentioned before we watched Thunderball, you jumped into the movie watching experience saying, "Hey, this is campy," right? That
yeah.
But even being campy, at least it stuck to itself. This one didn't even do that. Am I downgrading it just because it's after Thunderball, which I thought was pretty good, or is it just it's completely non-cohesive and that's what came after something that was cohesive, even if they're not focused on the same target, right? nothing about this movie felt like it was done with a purpose. Everything was so hard to watch, so hard to buy into. It was just, well, you have to watch it because it's Bond and the last one did really well, right? And it just, this felt almost like selling out. There was nothing about it that made me buy into it. Had this been the first Bond movie, there's zero chance I watched the sequel. This was so bad, even for the standards of the 60s. This was so terrible.
And to be honest, it's probably also maybe a little bit why the last one didn't really do that well financially. Of course, also maybe also audiences weren't really, ready for like Connery not being Bond. There's probably a whole bunch of different reasons on that. Because the other one's considered very, very underrated. Because like they didn't like it at the time. This one people liked at the time, but like it's just not as good as the other ones. It's just not. Which is a shame because like there's parts you could see the good movie in this.
The plot line was so good. Like had they built a good movie around the plot that they developed in the movie was fantastic.
Yeah, this is literally just bad execution.
Yeah.
It's just bad execution.
It really is.
It's like David Lynch's Dune. Bad execution, but plot-wise,
I'll give you that.
Decent.
I'll give you that.
But anyway, my overall thing, this is below Dr. No. That's where I rank it. I think Dr. No's is a better movie. I honestly think it's a better movie just because like to me, at least with Dr. No, you could at least give like an experience on how to make a Bond film. This, I think there isn't really any excuse to that.
I will. Okay. It might be the first time our rankings differ. I'm going to put it slightly above Dr. No. It's still second to last. Like I'm not putting it up there. But the reason that I think I'm going to put it above Dr. No is because the quality of film, like even though they did the wrong things, like they executed it poorly well. Like despite all of the bad and all of the complaints I have about it, they filmed what they intended to film and they filmed it well. Dr. No felt poorly constructed on all facets, and this one felt like they went the wrong directions, but they did those wrong directions in a positive manner.
All right, I get that.
It's not much above Dr. No, but it's above Dr. No.
I think should I? Oh no! After hearing that, it's like you have a good point.
I feel like your gut reaction is...
You know what? Just because Donald Pleasance is really good in this, it's above Dr. No. We're gonna match.
I'm fully of the mindset
that Tiger as well.
Tanaka was really good, but I didn't feel like he played enough of a role to there's not
enough Tanaka and there's not enough Donald Pleasance.
My gut reaction of it was at the time was like, this has to be worse than Dr. No, but having given it 24 hours and thinking about like everything I know about the movie, thinking about all of them as a whole, it was done.
Me liking the film, I was also kind of harsh, and then with you actually talking it out, I'm like, that's a good point.
I just like it was done in a good enough fashion that quality of film allows it to eke it out. Yeah. I won't give it a lot of credit above Dr. No. Like this was still a piss poor movie, and if had you been in there to watch it, you would know exactly how piss poor I thought it was.
Watch the clips of the movie if you want to enjoy things. Enjoy like the good clips of the movie.
I was so salty and bitter and outwardly upset with having to watch this movie. I left the Discord call instantly. Like credits came on, and I was like, "There's no chance I am waiting around for any of this," and I left. But it just like. The fact that it was done as a quality film felt better. and it's a gut reaction, and I'm sticking to it. But like, still really, really bad, and I don't want anyone to give this positive light based on the fact that it's better than Dr. No, but it's like, I have to give it a slightly better.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna say the same. Like, just to have like rankings. To be honest, when you kind of convinced me that's the same place as Doctor No, but like that's not gonna work. We're not gonna have tied rankings, so I'm pushing it up.
Hey, ties are okay, man. It's your own fucking list. You do what you want, man.
Ain't no ties on my list. Otherwise, there'll be like 4 top #1 Bond films. It's like, I can't really decide between GoldenEye and From Russia with Love. Tied.
I'm glad. As weird as it sounds, I'm glad we're in the same places. Like, the fact that me walking in as a newcomer, for all intents and purposes, can so far at least be equivalent to where we're at.
The only like thing that we really disagreed on was like Goldfinger, because you actually think Goldfinger's kind of a bad movie, and I actually, think it's a good movie. It just has its issues.
In terms of rankings, it's the same for us, but right. If you had to give it a ranking out of 10, we would differ, I think, pretty significantly. But overall, I mean, so far for 5 movies, the fact that we're all in about the same place is kind of nice.
And since we are ending Connery's first tenure as Bond, how would you describe that overall?
I think it's hard to give a fair description without like having something to compare it to. But I thought for most of the films that he filled the role that I expect Bond to fill. I don't have the ability to compare him to every Bond in this series, but
right.
So far,
you want to compare him to George Lazenby, even though he's only been in one film, or do you want us to wait until Roger Moore?
No, after the next one, we can compare. I mean, I think like what I know Bond to be might be different than what you know Bond to be, having seen them all, right? But like what I expect of
it also has to do with generation thing as well, because like to me it's like, well, who do you think is the most James Bond? And to me it's Pierce Brosnan, because I grew up with him being James Bond, know, while someone my parents' age would probably say Roger Moore or Sean Connery.
I guess like the things that you know about Bond without being hardcore into Bond are just that he's suave, he's witty, he's efficient, and
which
that he's
Connery
a womanizer.
Connery checks all those. Connery checks all those boxes.
There were moments that like any of the boxes could have lapsed, right? That like, hey, maybe in Dr. No he wasn't super witty, right? Like, okay, but the other 4 movies, like as an overall whole, I think he's hit all of the boxes that I expect Bond to hit. I have a pretty positive look on how Connery hit what I expect the Bond role to be, especially given the time and era. Like, knowing that the 60s may not be the same way that the 2020 is, or 2020's decade, of course, but like overall, what I know of Bond, I think Connery did a pretty good job. There were some lapses in everything I know, but it's hard to say efficiently whether or not, like, hey, good Bond, bad Bond, without seeing all of the others.
And to me, I don't think there's really someone that is bad at playing James Bond. It's just whether the film around him is terrible. Although Lazenby does get a lot of flack, but it was his first film, so like, cut the guy some slack.
But I mean, like I said, we'll be able to compare and contrast more easily once more of them have gone through. Especially with the next guy only having one movie, Connery coming back, and obviously like
only doing one film, but then Roger Moore comes back and does like 6.
Right. Right. It'll be
one
easier
more
to
than
compare
Connery, unless you want to count, because we are going to watch Never Say Never Again, which we're gonna watch before we get to Octopussy, just because like We could do that. We could have done that instead of this one, like, because Never Say Never Again is a Thunderball remake, but we're gonna view this like how like it was like viewed back in the day, and that was the Battle of the Bonds.
Okay.
So that's why we're having Never Say Never Again farther down, having that and Octopussy duke it out, which weirdest thing to say outside of any other context. But, more Roger Moore versus Sean Connery, that's going to be farther down.
Yeah, hey, listen, you dictate the order. I'm just going to sit there and watch.
Yeah. That's the only reason why Never Say Never Again's not right after Thunderball, but we probably will compare the two if we remember enough about Thunderball by the time we.
Yeah, I still got my notepad. We're still in business.
All right.
Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this one. It feels like we have not a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So, installment
next one
earlier.
Is.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Next one's on Her Majesty's Secret Service. We get to see George Lazenby as James Bond, and the only Bond that is not from the British Isles.
Okay.
Well, maybe. Hold on. Would Ireland be considered one of the British Isles?
That's still part of the UK, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong, and I don't mean to offend anybody.
The country of Ireland isn't. Northern Ireland is.
I thought the whole thing was the United
Kingdom. No,
okay.
Not the whole thing. Ireland's independent.
Well, Ireland and Northern Ireland are on the same island, right?
Yeah.
So it would still be the British Isles?
Isles, you think, but I don't know if Irish would consider themselves British, but okay, how about this?
They're not British. They're not, hold on. No, Irish and British are different, because British is Great Britain, which is the singular, but
that singular okay.
There still is a part of the United Kingdom, which I believe encompasses
non-European Bond. Let's just say that, because George Lazenby is from Australia.
Yeah, we're not here to fight geography.
We're Americans. Please give us, some slack about geography.
Hey, we're learning. Like this is not the end all be all. We're not. Yeah. Okay. As Stallman mentioned earlier, follow us both on Twitch. He's at Traductus. I'm at Ted Green Eagles. Both will be linked in the description, of course. Hop in the Cringe Crew Discord. Lots of gaming events, lots of people to meet, viewers, streamers, content creators of any sort, as well as, editors, designers, artists, anything you can imagine as far as content creation goes. We're here for all of it. Depending on when this video gets posted, kick W, because we're still looking for an editor as of the time we're recording this. We're still watching movies every week on Tuesday in the Discord at about 6:30-ish. Changes a little bit, but we've been pretty good so far about posting when and where it'll happen. So 6:30s on Tuesdays is usually pretty standard. Otherwise, Stallman, you got anything else?
Nope. Just hoping that people get to hear that message before we go through all like 20-something of these.
Oh man, if we get through 20-something of these without having posted a one, it's gonna feel pretty fucking bad. So you guys are watching this and all of them are around. I'm so sorry. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next week, and have a good one.
Yep, later.